Students, today I'm going to discuss with you the second chapter of your Hornbill textbook, which is entitled as We Are Not Afraid to Die, We Can All Be Together, written by Gordon Cook and Alan East. Now students, do you like adventure stories? If you like adventure stories, then this particular story will definitely satisfy your interest or desire for adventure. Now, what happens in this story? In this particular story, the narrator and his wife decide to imitate the voyage of the famous explorer James Cook. Now, students, do you know what James Cook is famous for? Now see, James Cook was a very famous British explorer and he took a voyage around the world, okay? And this family, that means the narrator's family, decide to imitate James Cook's voyage, okay? And they decide to take a journey around the world. And what do they do for that? They built a boat, develop a lot of seafaring skills, and then set sail for their journey. They experience a lot of troubles in their voyage which add up to their adventures. Okay, so this particular text tells about all the problems that they experienced during their voyage and all the adventures that they had. Okay, so now let us begin this particular story. So the first paragraph introduces us to the narrator himself. And who is the narrator? The narrator is a 37-year-old businessman who had the desire to go on a voyage around the world. So not only he, but also his wife had this desire of taking a voyage around the world. And for that, what were they doing? They had been developing their seafaring skills. Okay? And why did they have this strange desire of taking a voyage around the earth? Because they wanted to imitate the voyage of the famous explorer James Cook. So for their voyage, they got a specially designed boat known as Wave Walker. The boat was tested in harsh weather conditions so that it could be used for the 105,000 kilometer voyage. And do you know, students, how long did they take to complete one circle around the world? It took them 3 years. That means the journey around the world was of 3 years. Now students, when did they start their journey? They started their journey in July 1976. And the writer took along with him his wife Mary, his little son Jonathan, and his little daughter Suzanne. And where did they begin their journey from? They began from Plymouth, England, in order to set sail around the world. Now remember, students, the children were very small. Jonathan was just 6 years old and Suzanne was just 7 years old. So it was very difficult for the writer to take a voyage around the world along with the family. Now remember, students, the boat that they used was 23 meters long and it weighed up to 30 tons. It looked very beautiful, and that is why the writer says that it was a wooden hulled beauty. Now, the initial voyage went smoothly. They sailed down from the west coast of Africa to Cape Town. Till here, the journey was very smooth, and at Cape Town, they picked up 2 crew members, and they were American Larry Vigil and Swiss Herb Sigler. Now students, why did they pick up these 2 crew? Because they were about to tackle one of the world's roughest seas, the Southern Indian Ocean. As they left Cape Town and went ahead, they experienced strong winds blowing. And what were the strong winds known as? They are known as strong gales. Strong gales means strong winds. And the writer says that he was not afraid of the strong winds that blew. He was basically afraid of the waves that could reach up to great heights. And these waves were capable of sinking numerous ships. So this is the point of worry for the writer. Now, on December 25th, which is the day of Christmas, the family celebrated Christmas on the ship. And on January 1st, that is the New Year, the family celebrated New Year on the ship. So everything was going nice till January 1st. Now, at the dawn of January 2, things began to change. Now, students, you must be wondering what happened. Now, gigantic waves began to arise at the dawn of January 2. So, this signifies that weather conditions were gradually changing or they were becoming worse. Now, the writer decided to tackle the situation, and what did they do? They slowed down the boat by dropping the storm jib. They wore their life jackets and oilskins in order to protect themselves, and also they attached lifelines in order to protect themselves. Now, the writer could see enormous seas rolling towards them. That means they saw enormous waves rolling towards their ship. They were afraid because the height of the waves was very alarming or very frightening to look at. Now, at 6 p.m. that particular day, that means at 6 p.m. on January 2nd, what did they experience? Suddenly there was an ominous silence. What is this ominous silence? Silence which indicated that something bad was about to happen. So, you know, in the morning they experienced waves that were coming towards their ship, and those waves were very gigantic. They were up to 15 meters in height. But what happened in the evening? In the evening, there was an ominous silence. Suddenly everything fell silent. Everything seemed dark around them, and the writer saw that a cloud began to appear behind their ship. So when he looked intently, he saw that it was a gigantic wave, and this wave was even more in height than the previous waves that he had seen. Okay, so this particular wave that was rolling towards their ship was 30 meters in height, and the crest of the wave looked very frightening, as if it was about to hit the ship, and it actually happened. The wave hit the ship, and green and blue water poured into the ship's deck. And what happened? The writer's head was smashed onto the rudder or the steering wheel of the ship. And what happened? After that, the waves were so strong that the writer was thrown into the water body. He thought that his end was near. He was gradually sinking, but just then he came to his senses and his head popped out from the water. And what did he see? When he popped out his head, he saw that his ship was capsizing and it was not upright. Rather, the ship was tilted because of the strong force of the waves. The masts had fallen or had become horizontal. So immediately the writer swam across the water body in order to reach the ship. And what happened after that? When he was trying to take control of the wheel, there was another wave that set the boat upright. The force of the water was so strong that the writer fell on the deck or hit himself somewhere on the ship and broke his ribs. His mouth was full of blood and the waves were tossing the ship as if it was a rag doll. Now somehow the writer took control of the steering wheel or the rudder. And do you know, students, the steering wheel or the rudder is used to steer the ship in proper direction. Now just when he had taken control of the wheel, immediately his wife came in and said that there was water everywhere. Water was pouring into the ship from the crack or gaping holes made by the strong currents. The two crew members, Larry and Herb, began pumping out water just like madmen, and the writer could see clothes crockery, charts, tins, toys were all floating on the surface of the water. So water was pouring into the ship through the cracks and gaping holes. The writer took a hammer, screws and canvas in order to fix the problems in the ship or to repair the damaged parts of the ship in order to prevent the water from pouring into the ship. Now what happened? He stretched out the canvas and secured waterproof hatch in order to cover the gaping holes. And the crew members used hand pumps in order to pump out water from the ship. But gradually the hand pump stopped working. And the two other hand pumps which they had on the ship were already drenched and not working. Just then the writer remembered that there was another electric pump in the chart room floor. And what did he do? He immediately brought it out and used it in order to pump out water. The writer noticed that his daughter's head had been injured. Her head had been swollen and she had two enormous black eyes, and she also showed a deep cut on her arm. So she was injured because of the waves that damaged the ship. Now this was all about January 2, or these were the conditions or the problems that occurred on January 2. Now what about January 3? Let us read further and find out. On January 3, they continued to pump out water, and Wave Walker was not in a condition to go any further. Now what happened? The writer immediately opened up charts and calculated that there were two small islands a few hundred kilometers to the east. One of them was Isle Amsterdam, which was a French scientific base. So the writer and his family desired desperately to reach one of the two islands for safety. So this was all about January 3rd. Now what happened on January 4th? On January 4th, the pumping out of water continued. And remember students, because of the tragic incident that had occurred to them, the writer's family had not eaten anything. So what did the writer's wife do? Mary brought some corned beef and cracker biscuits which were stored in that ship. And the writer and his wife ate the corned beef and cracker biscuits because they had not eaten their meal for almost 2 days. But at 4 p.m. that particular day, black clouds began to appear. The weather again began to become unpleasant, and the weather continued to become worse until the next day. And what happened the next day? On the dawn of January 5th, the weather condition had deteriorated, or the weather condition was worse, and the family had little hope of survival. So what happened? An emotional incident took place in this circumstance. Now what happened? Jonathan, the small child of the writer, went up to his father and said, "Father, are we going to die? And if we are going to die, then I am not afraid of dying because we are all together." Okay, so this statement or this sentence of the son filled the writer with a lot of enthusiasm or power to protect his family. The writer began to have the confidence or the desire to protect his family desperately. Now John was not at all afraid to die. Okay, being a little child, he was not at all afraid to die because he was with his family. Now they had lost the main compass of the ship, so they were unable to find out the direction. Now what did the writer do? The writer saw the westerly currents that were flowing in that part of the Indian Ocean, and from the westerly currents he estimated the direction. He thought that if the ship was steered to 185 degrees, then definitely it might happen that they would reach the nearest island, and that is Isle Amsterdam. So he went up to Larry, one of the crewmen, and he set Larry to steer the ship to 185 degrees, and then the writer went and dozed off. When he woke up at 6 p.m., he received a huge hug from his son. And why did his son hug him? Now the son said that he was the best daddy of the world. Do you know why? Because what the writer had estimated, that had come out to be true. The writer had actually made a guess, that was, if the ship was steered to 185 degrees, then definitely by evening the ship would reach to the island of Amsterdam, and that's what exactly had happened. So Jonathan was very happy and he went up to his father and hugged him. So after some time, that means at night, the ship finally reached the island of Amsterdam, and 28 inhabitants from that island helped the writer's family to come ashore. The writer felt very optimistic and very happy. Not only the writer, but all the people who were there on the ship were very cheerful and optimistic. The writer remembered the adventures that they had in the past few days. He remembered how Mary, his wife, had been strong and how she took control of the wheel. He also remembered how his little daughter was very courageous and did not express any worry even though she had injured her head. And he also remembered about his little son Jonathan, who was not afraid to die even though the conditions were worse. Thank you, students.